Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SCA's 35th monthly Zoom presentation. My name is Brian Gallagher, and I'm the Vice President of the Society for Commercial Archaeology. I'll be your host tonight. Welcome to all our guests, and particularly followers of American Giants. We're happy you took the time out of your winter evening to watch an SCA presentation. I hope you enjoy the show. And for anybody watching the recording of this episode of the SCA's monthly presentations who's not a member of the SCA, we earnestly ask you to consider joining. Funding for the various activities of the SCA comes almost exclusively from our membership. Just visit our website at sca-roadside.org and follow the links. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing tonight's presentation. In the early 1960s, a man named Bob Prewitt started making fiberglass advertising figures and animals. The creation saw a marked increase in sales for businesses who used them. And for the next 10 years, there was an explosion of fiberglass advertising across the nation. The 1970s saw stricter shipping laws and price increases, and the fiberglass advertising era came to an end. The giant figures, commonly known today as Muffler Men, were seen by many as an eyesore, and most businesses removed them over the next 40 years. In the last 15 years, we have seen an unprecedented resurgence in these relics of the 60s, and they are once more appearing in numbers across the country. Tonight's presenter, Joel Baker, got interested in fiberglass advertising in 2011. After funding one of the giants standing in Florida, he dug deeper into their history, and a passion was born to learn more about the giants and to restore them. In 2012, he founded American Giants, and in 2015, started restoring the giants with his restoration team based in Illinois. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Joel to come on, and I think maybe, could one of my co-hosts unmute him if he's still muted? Let's see. Oh, I can do it. Okay. Joel, you should be unmuted now.
Yeah, looks like it. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and let me unmute. Let me see. Okay, we can't see you, but we can hear you. Can you get your camera going, perhaps?
Oh, yeah, I still don't think I have use of my mouse for some reason. So,
okay.
But if you can see the slideshow, that's the most important thing.
We can see the slideshow and we can hear you. So why don't you get started and we'll try to figure out how to get your camera going.
Okay, let me see if I can there we go. Okay, everyone can hear me. All right. Well, thank you so much everyone for coming. It's a privilege to talk tonight a little bit about one of my favorite topics. I've called this the fall and rise of the American Giant. I'm really going to focus on the resurgence, but let's start out with some history. I just love the history. When I built this slide deck, I realized that the entire 45 minutes was all history. So I had to knock out like a half of the history so we could talk about other stuff. Let's see here. There we go. All right, just a few things before we start. I ask that you please don't copy or repost any images that you see here. Hey, reach out to me if you want to use them. I'd be happy to talk to you. The information shared here is from my research, my personal journey, and the people who've helped influence me and who I've learned from. Roadside America, Gabriel Aldez, Vintage Roadside's been a huge help and support over the years. Roadside Architecture, of course, a lot of info there. And I want to thank the picture collection people who've helped me. Terry Nelson Collection, the Bill Swan family and their collection. I want to thank Mike McCracken Studios and the pictures they have supplied that have all really been invaluable in my research. And also Greg Holmes has loaned me he takes great pictures of some of the stuff we do, and he's let me use some of that. Just a reminder, with ongoing research and findings, information shared here may no longer be accurate. Over time, things are always changing in the Muffler Man world. And again, this is my personal journey with the Giants. I certainly don't claim to be the last word on Muffler Men. And I won't be covering everything. So please don't be upset with me if you go through the whole program tonight and you said, well, he never talked about the chicken boy, or he never talked about Sinclair dinosaurs or SO tigers. I had to cut a lot out. And please let me know if you have any concerns, or if there's an issue with accuracy. I'm always happy to learn more. So we're going to talk about, as Brian said, we're going to talk about fiberglass advertising. I'll give you some history here, and basically kind of the background. It doesn't mean that fiberglass advertising did not exist before 1960s. It did, but that's kind of when things really got crazy. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to start with Bob Prewitt. He's a cowboy rodeo man, loved horse shows and rodeos, and he was good with fiberglass. This is his business card in the upper right there. And this is back early 1960, 1961. I think he started messing around with fiberglass, and he started making some pools. This is original advertising from Prewitt Fiberglass. And Bob really wanted to make a horse trailer out of fiberglass that was much lighter than the heavier metal ones at the time. So that's what he really wanted to do. And he made one and started taking them to rodeos to sell them. And he had like a paper mache horse he would advertise inside the trailer, so you could see how your horse would look. And, once people would make fun of his horse, and somebody said, hey, you need to reach out to Gladys Brown. She's a sculptor and an artist, and have her make you a horse. She's amazing. Now, Gladys Brown Edwards was a noted horse artist and authority on the Arabian horse. She worked at the Kellogg Ranch for over a decade and was active in the Arabian horse community. Her husband, Cecil L. Edwards, also was a respected horseman. And so, sure enough, he was able to get her. She made him a horse, and being a fiberglass man, he pulled a mold off it. And he made a horse, and he went to like a rodeo, and he sold, like 15 horses, got orders for 15 horses and like 2 trailers. And Bob realized he was onto something. So he started making lots of different kinds of horses. He hired other sculptors and a crew, and he started making cows and horses and all kinds of animals. This is all original advertising. That's Bob Prewitt right there, posing with some of his horses. You guys will recognize some of these. Some of this stuff is still around and popular today, like the giant rooster. This is a whale here that he made. These prospector guys, I think, are still in Vegas. I'm not sure if he made them or if he was repairing them, but check out the truckload of all kinds of stuff headed to probably like the 1964 World's Fair there in the background. So as I said, Bob Prewitt, he really needed to find more sculptors. Gladys didn't work for him very long, as far as I know, and he needed to find more people to do art for him and sculpt these things. And so he found Bill Swan. Now, I did not know about Bill Swan till a few years ago, and this was a big revelation to finally get some more information about the people who worked for Bob Prewitt. This is Bill Swan and his wife, Jane. And this is Bill Swan working on the Mustang for Ford. And really cool side story here. A few years ago, the only Mustang I know, there's probably more than one out there, but the only one I know to exist, we were able to procure it and deliver it to the daughter of Bill Swan. And that's the lower right picture there. So she actually has a horse that her dad, I don't know if he sculpted that one, but he made the original that the molds were pulled off of. Bill did a bunch of stuff for Bob Prewitt. He did what we call mannequin versions. He did the horses, all kinds of horses, and he did what I call this guy Freaky Santa, but he's pretty cool. He's still out there. There's quite a few still left today. I want to talk about mannequins real quick. These predate Muffler Men, and this is something Bill did. And basically, it's a giant 24-foot statue that actually wore real clothes. And Bill's wife, Jane, actually sewed, I think, the chef costume or outfit here for the chef. But there's a few of them went out, not a whole lot. One ended up in Idaho and is in Canada, north of Calgary today, still stands. And we thought that was the only one, right? But then a few months ago, I figured out that in Albuquerque, there was a Muffler Man, a regular bunion, and it burned down. And so they wanted to find another lumberjack, and they found this chef guy in California, I believe. And so they hauled him to Albuquerque and set him up at the May Cafe. It was probably called something else back then. And so that guy in Albuquerque, you guys probably know what I'm talking about if you've seen it. He's actually a mannequin. And I didn't figure that out for a long time, but he's actually the chef one that's in the picture here. So that's really cool. So Bill Swan, he is the father of really Muffler Men. He's the guy that created the first Paul Bunyan. And this isn't something we knew about until just a few years ago. Thankfully, when his family talked to us. And so these are all pictures in 1963 of the first Muffler Man being made at Prewitt Fiberglass in Lawndale, California. And then you have another family named the Dashews, and this is Stanley Dashew here on the right with a copy of his book. I think you can get this on Amazon, but Stanley had found success in the 1950s by becoming one of the founders of the plastic credit card industry. Dashew had introduced the data bosser, which was embossed numbers read by an IBM punch card onto a credit card. And he went on to create mechanical systems in the business, data banking, and shipping and mining industries, just to name a few. The entire Dashew family loves the ocean and sailing. This spread to Stanley's son, Steve, who they nicknamed Skipper. And in 1963, Stanley helped Steve run a company called West Coast Industries Incorporated. And because of the mutual interest they had in sailing and boats, they started making fiberglass boats under a division of West Coast Industries that they called International Fiberglass. So this is Steve on the left here with his wife, and in the lower left picture with his family back in the 60s. This is the Eliminator. This is one of the boats that International Fiberglass made. And International Fiberglass and Steve quickly realized they wanted to offer more than just boats. And so they basically talked to Bob Prewitt, and they bought him out. I think Bob continued his business, but they bought a bunch of his molds. And so all of a sudden, International Fiberglass, everything switches over to them. And now they have all the roosters and the bears and the Muffler Men and all this stuff. And they kept building, right? They kept adding to that collection. So this is original advertising from International Fiberglass, some of the stuff that they could make. I want to spend just a second here and pause and talk about a woman named Miss Violet Winslow. Not very well known, but she is vital to International Fiberglass. They would not have been who they were without her. And Steve Dashew has told me this, as well as other people who worked for International Fiberglass at the time. They've talked about her and all the stuff she did to make all these fiberglass animals appear all over the country, and the marketing. She was the director of advertising, sales, and promotion. And this is the only picture I'm sorry, folks. It's like, why is he showing the backside? That's all I have. That's all I've been ever able to find of Violet Winslow. So she was in charge of their marketing. She did a great job of working on the advertisements and letting everyone know about Muffler Men. And these guys appeared in a few trade magazines, and the feedback from owners was stellar. About their business is picking up, and as Steve Dashew put it later, the invasion was on. Right, they started making all kinds of products. These are just a few. I had to take so much out, but these are all pictures from International Fiberglass in the 60s. They made small stuff and they made giant stuff. I mean, look at the size of this cow. You can see I found a lot of the original advertising here. 21 feet, 11 feet high, weighed 1,500 pounds. And these things were getting shipped out. It's actually interesting. International Fiberglass had a whole crew of people, and they had a whole crew of construction guys, and these guys made crates. This guy on the bottom here, his name was Bud, and Bud built the crates for all this stuff being shipped out back in the 60s. This is probably around 1964. This picture actually is a little later, but they started around 1964 shipping all this stuff out. And you can see, how huge some of this stuff was. Here's some of the roosters they made. They did different paint jobs. They really catered to the customer's wishes. This is an example of how some of the roosters were used at mini golf courses and so on. There was another sculptor. International Fiberglass hired multiple sculptors, not just Bill Swan, but this is Mike McCracken. He designed all the trash can animal heads that would go on, barrels and be in parks, encourage kids to throw away their trash. Brilliant idea, and did an amazing job. You can still find these once in a while, and that's Mike McCracken there. Actually riding the Mustang, and that's International Fiberglass back lot there. And then let's talk about the Muffler Men, right? That was one of the molds that came with all the purchases they did from Bob Prewitt. And so you have the Paul Bunyan, that's the classic, that's what Bill Swan made. And then they decided, hey, let's take this and let's make some different versions of it so we can hit a lot more businesses. We can offer a lot more variety. So they made what I call the standard version there on the left. It could advertise and be painted, advertise for anybody and be painted any way the customer wanted it. And then you add a hat, right, in a 6-shooter, and now you have a cowboy version. They also did Native American Indians. They did a chief, and they did a brave, and you can see Chevy used it, Mohawk. These are 2 different versions they made. The pants, notice it's the same as the Paul Bunyan, but they were just able to change the upper half. And then they made a third American Indian version that there's hardly any of these left, but I call him the tomahawk version. And he had like a loincloth, and he had ruffles on his pant leg and a tomahawk, and some of them had the long headdress there. So they're pretty rare and hard to find. And then the oil industries got interested in this and started doing programs with International Fiberglass, again, with the hard work of Violet Winslow. And Mobil used them, Texaco used them, American, I've seen pictures of the Bunions standing at standard gas stations. Gulf Oil did a program with the bow tie version and the special hat and paint job. Those guys are really cool. Sunoco used them. I think in the 90s, they might have found some originals and repurposed them. And of course, Phillips 66 did a massive program with them for their cowboy program, the gas that won the West. And then we have the Spaceman. Now, of course, a lot of you are probably familiar with the Gemini Giant on Route 66, just south of Chicago. But there was more than him, right? We know of 3, actually. And the 2 that are pictured here are the ones that are missing. One was in Los Angeles, the one on the left there, and then this one in Coney Island, the one on the right. We don't know what happened to them. We're hoping they still turn up one day, but the only survivor is the Gemini Giant. We've all seen him, so I didn't put a picture in here. The restaurants were also interested in these giants. Apparently, Waffle House used them probably briefly, maybe just this one. We don't really know. But then the giant on the right is actually the La Salsa Man that still stands in Malibu today. Many of you have photographed and visited him. That's how he looked when he was first put up in around 1965. The Bunions were a great fit for breakfast restaurants, Paul Bunyan restaurants, perfect fit. So there was a number of those across the country. The guy on the left here is called Mr. Bendo, slightly different arm position. He held an iron bar that was bent, and the purpose was to advertise the fact that a muffler shop with one of these giants in front of it could bend a muffler pipe to fit any car and fit your car. And so there were quite a few of these across the country as well, used by the company who made the machine that bent the pipe. And it was a promotional piece, basically, that you could get at your store if you wanted. And then the guy on the right is a Midas tire man. Midas actually used Muffler Men. They call him King Midas. He had a crown, and this is from New Orleans. And then they made what we call snurds. Now, Roadside America refers to them as happy halfwits, but the company International Fiberglass actually called them snurds. And they are kind of an Alfred Newman looking character, mostly used at amusement parks and, golf putt-putt courses, but they could be used for anything. I've seen vintage pictures of these guys at pizza places. And Uniroyal Tire, they didn't want to be left out, but they wanted to do something different. So they said, hey, instead of one of those guys that looks like all the rest across the country, we want a girl. And so International Fiberglass made what we call the Uniroyal gal. That was a term coined by Roadside America. And whenever these giants went out, it was often accompanied by a newspaper advertisement like you see here. And you can win prizes, you could guess the weight or guess the height and come in, and it was kind of a local attraction. And the giants would be in town for maybe 2 weeks, and then they would go on to the next business. Notice the platform she's standing on there. This was very typical for Muffler Men, Uniroyal gals, and many of the giants. You can see here on the right, this is a patent by Steve Dashew. He actually turned this in, patent this trailer and platform, but he designed this so a vehicle could pull the giant on the trailer. They could get to a gas station or a tire store and tie the tie rope to a telephone pole and then to the eye bolts, and the car could pull forward, and it would just raise that giant into a vertical position. And then the casters on the platform, you could roll the giant around. And you can see that on the Uniroyal Girl there on the left, how it kind of worked. So that really helped move and set up and transport these giants quickly, because they were used in promotions, and often a station only had them for like two weeks or so. International Fiberglass also made a 14-foot version. If you could not house or afford a 20-foot Paul Bunyan, you could get a 14-foot Paul Bunyan. And these were mostly used by the Lombard Chainsaw Company, which is now long gone. But this was their mascot. And if there was a store that sold Lombard chainsaws, chances are at some point in time, one of these giants would arrive and stand in front of the store and promote Lombard chainsaws. And his name was Luke Lombard, and he was basically their mascot. You can still find these guys, some of the survivors today, and they had hard hats with the name. Most of the time the name was on the chest, but in this picture you can see it's actually on the hat. International Fiberglass made Pioneer Men for the Wagon Hoe restaurant. They made, I love this guy, they made the push cart, Tony's push cart. It was actually a guy that would stand behind a little diner building, like he was pushing it, right? Like it was a push cart. And I think there's only one left of this version. I have one of the hats. It's actually in my backyard, but only one giant left. And then we have the Viking for carpet Vikings. Those are still popular today, the few that remain. And Richard Ellis, he was another sculptor for International Fiberglass. He made the caveman there. I think it's in Grants Pass. And they also made the giant Uncle Sam that was at Danbury Fair. You can see a picture in the lower right there of them making that, probably around 1968. And then, of course, the A&W root beer family. Again, Violet Winslow was busy, right, with all these big companies doing marketing programs. And here's a picture in the lower left of the president of A&W and some of his staff at the launching of these giants. International Fiberglass made them, and then they were shipped all over the country to stand either on the ground or on the roof of A&W places. And there's an A&W not too far from me that still has the Papa Burger. So very successful program. And you can still find these guys today. All right, let's spend a few minutes talking about my favorite thing. My favorite giant. It's called the Texaco Big Friend. The Texaco started out with using a Muffler Man to advertise, but then they said we want to be different. You know, back in the 60s, Texaco was so much more than just like a convenience store where you got a Coke and a bag of chips. It was really like a doctor for your car. And they, you know, the Texaco jobbers, the station managers, they were known in their community. They were involved in the local baseball games. It was just like a whole different community atmosphere back then. And they knew everything about your car. They would send you postcards in the mail when different things were due on your car. And so Texaco really wanted to advertise the station manager, basically the attendant, right? So they called it their Big Friend program. And they had International Fiberglass make a unique giant that nobody else had. And the International Fiberglass actually hired a fine arts sculptor to do it. And they launched this program. They made 300 of them, and they were launched out across the country. Huge program. There was commercials on TV, the Big Friend program. And the Big Friend Service program actually turned quickly into a big problem program for Texaco. And the reason was there were some lawsuits of people complaining they had an accident because they were looking at the giant, not at the road. A lot of communities saw them as eyesores, and they were blowing over in the wind and creating liability issues there. And Texaco pulled the plug, said this was a dumb idea. They weren't even out 1 year. They started late summer 1966, and by April, May 1967, gone, or all 300 order destroyed. They were so successful that there's only 6 of these guys left today that I know of. International Fiberglass also made what we call the Professionals, and it was a 10-foot version that could advertise for whatever you wanted it to. And you can see some examples here. Notice in the left picture. This is really cool. There is an International Fiberglass sticker on his leg, on his lower leg. And once in a while, you'll find a giant that still has remnants of these stickers on it. But these guys were really cool. They were actually, DX Gas used it. A lot of people use these. And you could actually see if I can make it go here. They were animatronic, right? So there was a motor in there, and their hand could wave. And these are a few that we still have around today. These are a few that I found that have trickled down, and people own them. Some are in really rough shape. And this is a shot, guys, of the yard at International Fiberglass. I'd give anything to go back in time and walk around in this. There's so much stuff here, some surplus Papa Burgers, and yeah, feed your eyes on all this stuff. All this is buildings now. It's all long gone, but this is what the yard looked like in the late 60s. So the end of the fiberglass era came for a few reasons. The 1973 oil crisis, resin costs, transportation, trucking regulations were increasing and getting harder to ship the things. Zoning ordinances, enforcement for signs. People were complaining they were local eyesores, and advertising was going in a new direction with media marketing, and things were just changing. Like anything, things come in, things go out. And by the early 70s, 1973, International Fiberglass had mostly stopped making the figures and the giants. But they didn't hang on as long as they could. They saw it coming, and they jumped into the construction business, and they changed their name to Interform. And they actually made these fiberglass shells here that you would pour concrete around and make the roofs of hospitals and parking garages and all kinds of different buildings. I'm sure you guys recognize the picture in the upper right, like that style of ceiling. I'm sure we've all seen it. That's International Fiberglass. That's what they went into. And these days you can still find, of course, there's the full-size giants, but every once in a while you find pieces and parts. People have all kinds of cool stuff in their collections, arms and heads and stuff that have trickled down. All right, so now we'll jump into my story. This all started for me. I wish it would have started when I was 5, but it didn't. I didn't know about it until 2011. And I was doing some research to figure out what in the world this dinosaur was in Florida on the upper right there. And I found Roadside America, and I found their Muffler Man map. And the closest Muffler Man at the time to me was Dade City. So I drove over there real quick. And something like clicked in my head when I saw my first Muffler Man. And instead of just like wanting to see a bunch and taking pictures, I went deep very quickly into the history and digging into all these. The nice thing about starting this in 2011 was there's a lot of statues that were up then that are gone now. So I was taking pictures of immediately within the first few months. I was doing work trips and I was going to see these guys. So I have a lot of pictures in my collection of giants that are now long gone. And these are a few examples of all giants that no longer stand. I'm really thankful that I started when I did. And like I said, I really started digging deeper than, just posing with a giant here and there. I was talking to business owners and digging in old newspapers, and I really was trying to glean all this background information. My favorite thing was to find giants that had appeared online and were gone, or that Roadside America had mentioned and were gone. Like there was 3 sentences about one in Puerto Rico. Well, I flew down to Puerto Rico and spent some time showing the picture around town, and I found the thing. It was in front of actually in the back alley behind the garage, the auto place care center it was at, and nobody had ever posted a picture online. So it was like finding Tut's tomb for me. I was just elated. And there I am at another business. One had disappeared, and I went there and found it in the weeds behind the office, and actually convinced the owners to sell it to me. So that's a Phillips 66 Cowboy that's in our collection. And this other guy, this waving giant here, I'd heard about him, and I went to the town and started talking to people, and eventually ended up at a business where I showed them a picture, and they're like, yeah, that thing's in our attic. And so I climbed up this like rickety ladder and moving cobwebs aside, and here's like this waving giant sitting up there. So I just love that kind of stuff. That just was so rewarding to me and fun. In 2012, we started doing some videos on YouTube, me and my buddies that I worked with. And we would put a GoPro on top of a pole, and we would get these really cool shots of the face of Muffler Men. We went up and down Route 66 in Illinois. And this is me talking to Bill Thomas here in Atlanta, Illinois. And that's very significant conversation because that started a friendship that would go in places I never thought would. The museum actually came as a result of that conversation right there that happened 10 years ago. But this is us on the route. Then we started, I always tracking these guys down, always looking. I found this guy in a donkey pasture in Kentucky. I think it was a tip on Roadside America. And I went and talked to the owners, an elderly couple, and they didn't want to sell him to me, but I convinced them to loan him to me so I could fix him up. And I had no idea what I was doing. I can't even believe I asked them, and they agreed to loan him. So we went with a trailer, me and my buddies, and we picked him up. And the extent of my restoration experience at that time was to basically take it to a car wash. But that's fortunately not where we stopped. Around the same time, I was making a partnership with Mark Klein. He's a fiberglass artist in Natural Bridge, Virginia. And he helped me out to get a head and hands that we could put on this guy, right? So this was the beginning of our restoration. That's me sanding in the left there, learning how to sand on the giants. That's Will Wharf. He's kind of our internal structure and welder, and he does a lot of sanding for us. And then Michael Youngkin there in the bottom right, he's our fiberglass expert. And that's him working on a Luke Lombard. It was actually a Luke Lombard guy. We uncovered all the original lettering. You see, it says Implement Specialty Company. We figured out that this guy was in St. Louis back in the 60s. That's who he was ordered by. And so when you restore these guys and you dig through all this paint, you often find all these really cool clues. And sometimes the workmen at International Fiberglass would Sharpie in information on the inside, and that's been helpful as well. Back then we used my friend Neto to do some of the painting, and we just basically, this was the first one we ever did, and we taught ourselves how to restore these guys, and it was very rewarding to set them up. We'd run a Kickstarter. We'd gotten some help. We had different people. One guy, one of my friends drove up from Nashville for this. And so we had a little bit of support there, and it was very, very exciting to set this guy up and get some pictures with him, all restored. And then, of course, my first Muffler Man, I never really planned to own a bunch, but my first Muffler Man was a Snurd version that had started out in Ohio, ended up at a bar in Madison, Ohio by the 80s. And he actually was named, they called him Horny Warny, right? So that was his nickname. It was printed on his chest, and he was owned by a Mad enthusiast named John Hett, who had a huge collection of Mad memorabilia. This is Al Feldstein, actually, at a Michigan conference where the guy was. And then in 2012, John agreed to sell him to me. He actually had him on eBay for a while, knowing no one was buying it. So John and I reached an agreement. And I thought I was paying an exorbitant amount of money for him at the time, just the upper half here, which would be a steal today, actually. But I had found another pair of legs in Indiana, lower right picture there, that I picked up. And my original plan was to put the two together, and that didn't happen. But this is my first Muffler Man I ever got in 2012. And I put him up in the garden behind my house. There was an event at a local school where they asked if they could borrow him and use him at the putt-putt course there they made. And I actually put an American flag over the first part of his name to keep things decent. But this guy will actually be at our museum. And I think I'm going to leave the paint. We'll repaint him, but I think I'm going to keep the paint scheme just the way it is here. The WW up there on his hat stands for wagon wheel. Our second restoration was the Chief in Lake of the Ozarks. He stood at a place called 2-Bit Town, and people started to hear about what we done with the Muffler Man in Kentucky, and so they approached us, and we got to work right away on him. I think we were like, "What are we doing? You know, this guy's huge. How are we going to do this? Are they going to be happy with our work?" But I'm very glad we took it on. Michael and Will did a fabulous job on this guy, sanding them all down. Took us months to work on this. It's also the time when we really started working on the internal structures and designing a better way that these guys could stand in high wind environments. And so you can see Michael there working on the internal structure on these custom foot plates that we would make that go under his feet, and then the pipes go up into the waist and bolt in and go to the shoulders. The lower left picture there, I should still do this. I got all the friends I had in town and I fed them and I asked them to sand the legs, and we did it in one day. It normally takes us weeks. So that was kind of a fun memory. And then we set them back up. We knew we were onto something when BBC sent a film crew out to see what we were doing. We thought, oh, that's cool. And then Kurt Robinson, he's our painter now. We discovered him right around this time. He just does amazing paint jobs for us. We're just so thankful that he's on board and with his airbrush skills. And this is what the chief looked like when we put him up. Hopefully, I think he still looks about like this. All these years later, this is 2016. This was our second restoration. Our third restoration was a uniroll gal that I found in a guy's backyard. Again, through my incessant digging, driving around neighborhoods, talking to locals. I found her finally. Took me a while, a couple trips, and she's fantastic. He agreed to sell her to me. We took her back to the shop and sanded her all down, and I sold her to a guy in Dallas, Georgia, I believe it is, and he wanted her painted a little bit like Wonder Woman, so that's why she has that paint job. But again, this is a Kurt Robinson paint job, and set her up. Our fourth restoration was a gas station guy that had stood at a marathon station in Maine, and he was owned by a company that wanted to sell him. And one of the things we do is we help, if you have a Muffler Man, you want to sell it, we help you find a buyer. And so we found a buyer for them, and then the buyer hired us to restore the guy and transport him and set him up. He had a lot of damage on his back end there that we completely fixed. And then we actually started doing some fabrication. We made a wine bottle for him to hold, and that was the first time we'd ever made like something for them to hold, and we set that up in Texas. Restoration number 5 was the what I call the Canada Cowboy. This was a Phillips 66 Cowboy that had stood in Calgary and ended up in a junkyard near Edmonton. And somebody watching YouTube saw this guy and sent me the YouTube video, and I contacted the guy who shot the video and figured out where it was. And then contacted the junkyard and actually went up and got this thing. And he was such a wreck that when I drove 15 hours up there and got him, I remember thinking, oh, this was a mistake. This guy's too far gone, right? But he wasn't. We reached out to Mark Klein on this job, and Mark did a fantastic job of putting him back together. And then we painted him and set him up in East Troy, Wisconsin. Mark did the milkshake and the hot dog for him to hold. And this is actually one of my favorites because it's such a cool story, and it was such an investment for me to go up there in the middle of winter and drive them on all these icy roads back home. So, a lot of personal memories, and then for him to turn out so fantastic. And then this business, Gus's Drive-In, where he stands, they do like all kinds of hot rod shows in the summer, and all kinds of classic cars come and park around them. And I think it's the coolest thing. I got to get back up there. Restoration number 6 was a Bunyan that had stood in Chicago back in the 60s. And then he ended up in a Wisconsin campground. And again, through some of my digging, eventually found him and contacted the owner. And the owner didn't want to sell him. So I would call the owner once a year, every year on the same date. And after like 3 or 4 years, he said, okay, come get him. So this guy needed new feet. He didn't have any feet. They had been cut off long ago. But so that was new for us to have. Mark Klein made the boots and from a mold that we pulled off another guy. And so we were able to put some new feet on him, and also an axe, working that with the hands. That was a new experience for us. And this guy got set up at Cumberland Ridge Forest Products or something like that in Kentucky. And he turned out awesome. Again, a Kurt Robinson paint job on this guy with the axe. One thing you'll notice in the upper right here, we love to figure out what's under old paint. And this guy's name was Complaint Manager, apparently at some time in his life. Took us a long time to figure out these lettering, but we finally figured it out. And that's Michael there, our fiberglass guy. Sticking his head in the hand of a Muffler Man. We have fun in the shop. We really do. Restoration number 7 was the giant that actually stood right across the street from the chief in Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri. And when the owner saw what we did with the chief, he said, all right, you guys got to restore our guy too. And so we got that job. We brought it to our shop. The feet were like almost coming off. Michael did a lot of fiberglass repair on this guy, a lot of sanding, refitted the head so it would fit properly in the neck area. It was all wrong. I'm not sure how that happened, but we got him painted. This guy is still not standing. The owner is, still working out some details about where exactly he's going to stand, but we'll let you all know when he gets set back up. But he's restored. He's ready to go back up, and he'll have an internal structure in him and all that good stuff that we do. So, I've seen since I started this in 2011, and then all this stuff that we've done, and then of course with the help of many of you who post on social media and have helped bring so much recognition to Muffler Men, there's kind of been this resurgence. And there was actually, it got to the point where there were so many people that wanted Muffler Men that there wasn't enough originals to go around, because oftentimes if you own an original one, you don't want to sell it. And so working again with Mark Klein, we started making new ones. He started making new ones. And when people would buy from us, we'd use him. If you wanted a brand new one, you could customize them any way you wanted. Sound familiar? Exactly what International Fiberglass was doing 50 years ago. So these are starting to pop up all over the place, especially on Route 66. Here's a few examples of ones that Mark has made. And oftentimes Mark will make them. We'll do the internal structure and the transport and the setup. We've done, so these days, that's our specialty. We do the transport, we do the takedown and the setup, basically whatever you need. Some of great experiences we've had is working with Magic Forest in Lake George, New York. They had a bunch of Muffler Men. We went up there and took them all down. That was a great experience, a lot of fun. Here we are in Sherman, Texas. Michael is hooking up one of the Glenn Good cowboys there. This is actually a waving giant version with the wrong head on it. We moved that to California. One of our favorite experiences was working with Mary Beth Babcock from Tulsa, Oklahoma, Buck Adams. This guy's an icon. He's probably just as well known now as the Gemini Giant, as a icon of Route 66, especially for Oklahoma. This is a Mark Klein job. Mark Klein made him, and then we did the internal structure on him and the transport and the setup. And this was a lot of fun. One of the great memories we've had on this Muffler Man journey so far. Me and Michael down there, and Chris, the guy who made the rocket. And you can go see this guy in Tulsa. Probably gets hundreds or thousands of visitors a year now. And so this is all now leading to a path to the museum, right? Even though I never would have believed that when I started. And it really started with this Texaco Big Friend in Pahrump, Nevada, that I got to see and take pictures of when I first got into Muffler Men. He came down shortly thereafter, ended up at the dump, and then he ended up at the local museum, and just kind of sat behind the museum in pieces for a few years. And so I pleaded my case to the museum that I was this guy's hope, that we could restore him back to an original Texaco Big Friend. And they believed in me, and they agreed to sell him to me in the condition that I would do that. And that is becoming a reality. Me and my buddy Neto went down there and loaded him up. You know, his arm was chock full of pigeon poop from like 20 years standing on that sign, and it weighed like 2 tons. And we had to sit there and get every bit of that out of his arms before we could even lift it into the truck. So these giants never disappoint in the stories that they give you to tell. This is us working on the Texaco Big Friend. We had to completely rebuild him because they completely destroyed him when they took him down off that sign. You can see the original T there, the Texaco logo, and under the paint, some of the original coloring that we were able to blast away with the pressure washer. And what's happening now, this is really cool, as we gear up for this museum that's going to open. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. We've had 2 other Big Friends that are going to join us. So we're actually going to restore 3 Texaco Big Friends all at the same time. Ours didn't have the right hat because his hat was modified to the point where we could not bring it back to original. So we worked with Vintage Roadside on getting a hat from them because they have an original head and hat here on the right picture you can see. So we got a replacement hat for ours, not this one, but they made a copy for us. So that was a great partnership with them. And then there's two big friends here on the left. The one on the top there was from Detroit. The Texaco owner of the station, when they discontinued these, he did not abide by the rules. He took the guy home, put it up in his backyard, just the torso, cut some holes in it and made it into a playground for his kid. And that thing sat in that Detroit backyard until last summer. When it was purchased, and now it's in our shop to get restored, and we're going to fix those holes. And I actually had a pair of legs I found in California that we're going to put on this guy. And then there's another one, this one on the bottom left here. He's a Texaco big friend that was found at a petroleum plant in Bozeman, Montana in the 80s. And it trickled down through a few owners over the years. But he also is going to, I think he's going to get fixed by Mark Klein, and then he's going to come to us for painting. So I just think that's really exciting. There's only 6 big friends left, and we're going to have 3 of them that we're restoring. So that's really exciting. And over the years, I've collected a lot of stuff, SO Tigers, Vikings, a lot of this stuff. I never set out to amass a huge collection, but a lot of it just kind of happened. There's a professional in the lower left, and it's my dream that these don't just sit in a barn or a garage, but that they can be enjoyed by the public again, like they used to be. And that's where we started. And my Midas man, this came out of New Orleans. I think he was in a Hurricane Isaac brought him down, and we were trying to sell him for the owners, and nobody was interested. This was right before COVID, and it was kind of during COVID that things went crazy with Muffler Men. I don't know why, but yeah, we couldn't find a buyer. So finally, I told the owner, I said, okay, I'll just buy it from you. And so I'm glad we did. So we have a Midas guy, and this guy will also go at the museum with the crown and everything. This is us picking him up, and there he is with our professional in the shop. I forgot I threw these slides in there last minute. So the American Giants Museum, let's talk about that. You remember I talked about Bill Thomas and our friendship that started with him back in 2012. Bill is on the Atlanta Betterment Fund, it's called. And what we did is the Atlanta Betterment Fund wanted to work with us. If we would loan our collection, they would raise, and they're still working to raise, the money for a building. And so we have a partnership with the Atlanta Betterment Fund. And this is Atlanta, Illinois, on Route 66, very, very close to the hot dog Muffler Men that probably many of you have seen. But this is Bill Thomas. This is Stan, our architect, working on the design. This is our logo. This is me when we bought the Texaco banjo sign that's going to go right next to our big friend. And this is the building. The Atlanta Betterment Fund still needs help. So feel free to reach out to me if you want to be a part of this. But they have started building. And this is the building. It loosely will resemble a Texaco station. And please don't say, hey, that's not what a Texaco station really looks like. We know that, but it's going to kind of resemble one. Inside will be like all the exhibits, and then outside will be the Giants. In the upper left corner there, how close it is to the hot dog. Real quick, we're almost done. This is the American Giant Museum exhibits. Some of the things that will be in the exhibits, there'll be lots of info panels, old historic pictures, and then the figures, of course. We'll have like the Mama Burger in there. Some of this stuff will be unrestored, and some of it will be restored. We'll have an SO Tiger in there. We'll have some cool international fiberglass products that you probably don't see very often, like these tires that tire stores used back in the 60s. We'll have some Muffler Men heads there. There'll be a tomahawk from the tomahawk version chief that I talked about earlier. There's a Unirogal leg there, all kinds of stuff. A lot of little odds and ends we've collected over the years. We'll also have some Big John grocery bags in there, and some history on the Big John statues. They were not made by International Fiberglass. But we actually found the lower right picture there. I just threw this in there because I thought you might find it interesting. But that's the original molds that were made in the 50s or 60s to build all those Big Johns. And we actually found them rotting in the woods in Tennessee. and we're able to get them so we can make spare parts. And Mark Klein made us a head from that mold. So we'll have the Big John head in the museum. So I hope I haven't gone long. I have been looking at the clock, but that that is kind of been our adventure over the years. And I just want to thank SCA and all of you for your support. You guys have been fantastic over the years, all the followers on Instagram. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Joel. That was an unbelievable presentation. It was absolutely fascinating. We've got a ton of questions and comments here, and including a whole bunch from our friend Deborah Jane Seltzer, who has encyclopedic knowledge of the giants as well. So you'll see all that in the chat. But let me go back to a few of the some of the questions here. First of all, Deborah Jane talks about a mannequin in Airdrie, Alberta, and I'm a Canadian too, so I was happy to hear that you mentioned the giant that was found in Edmonton. She goes, note that they were naked with articulated arms. Special clothes were made by International Fiberglass or the customer. So what's the story with clothes on these guys and girls? Did they ever wear clothes, or that was part of the fiberglass?
Well, these days it's often part of the fiberglass, because you could take real clothes. That's what they started out making, real clothes for them. That's my understanding. Now, I may not have 100% there, but my understanding, and talking with Bill Swan's daughter, whose mother, made the clothes for the chef, they were actually real clothes, giant clothes that were made and put on these guys. Obviously, that's not going to last forever. So what you have happen with the guy in Albuquerque that I saw is that over time, you could fiberglass, you could put resin on the clothes and it would harden, and then it would last, and you could paint it, and it would last much longer. So that's probably something of what's going on with the one in Canada. Obviously clothes aren't going to last 50 years, but yes, my understanding is that the originals had real clothes on. Okay. And she's right, the arms did move. You could change the position of the hands and things like that.
Now, Nancy Sturm had a bunch of questions. I'm going to ask Nancy. Nancy, you can unmute yourself if you would like to, if you're still there.
Excellent.
Nancy. Yeah, can you
ask
Joel your questions?
Yeah, so I'm all about the money, because I've been a long time fundraiser, and I'm just looking for my questions. One is, how do you fund all this work? Is this a labor of love? Are you fundraising for this? How do you do this?
We, in the beginning, when we did the first one, we did the Kickstarter. And I think I've run 2 Kickstarters, and that was right in the beginning. And that was a lot of work, because you have to give rewards to all the people that give. So we quit doing that. And basically what happened with us is the money we would get from our restorations, when we charge to do like the Ozark Chief and so on, that money can get turned back around to buy more or fund these restorations. So it's really, it's not so much business for profit. A lot of this stuff just goes back into purchasing more giants. And then when the museum idea came, it's like, okay, I'm going to start holding on to more of these and not selling them. And they're getting harder to find, right? The originals. So we can loan them all to the museum. But obviously, yeah, money's needed, especially on the museum side. The Atlanta Betterment Fund is going to, be raising money to pay for the building. That's really on them. We're loaning the giants. So our spending is getting our giants restored so we can loan them to them.
So relatedly, because I had asked, how do you get any compensation when you restore giants and return them to owners? It seems like you might encounter some reluctant owners who's like, well, I don't want to get involved with all that. I just like seeing this guy, in my yard. And then you have to convince them to give you money to restore them, and then you return them. I mean, how does that work?
Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot of Muffler Man owners out there, and a lot of them are owned by, all kinds of people. They've been passed down. There is no pressure from us to restore anything. We only get the restorations where people find us and come to us and say, hey, we've seen your work and we want our giant restored.
I see.
And it's mostly businessmen. It's mostly business men or women are owners of businesses and they can afford it. And they've seen our work and they're willing to pay to get that kind of quality. Now you can go to Walmart and buy a bucket of paint and restore your Muffler Man, and that's fine, you know, and for some people, that's really the only option. But if you want like a knockout of the park paint job and every crack and everything fixed and an internal structure put in it, then people come to us.
And that's going to probably cost in, you know, tens and 20 thousands of dollars. Is that what it's going to cost?
It depends on what we do. It's generally not over 20, but it depends. You know, if we're adding things they hold and, you know, all kinds of stuff, then it can be more. So they vary. They vary.
So you're paying your craftspeople to do the work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Joel, thank you so much. That's terrific. And you're an inspiration to us all as longtime SCAers.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Appreciate it.
And I hope
Thanks,
you're creating a 501c3 so we can all donate to your organization.
Yes. It's in the works. We'll get that information to you. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks, Nancy. Those are good questions. Actually, Nancy had I posed one other question too, which I'll pose for her. And were the giants typically purchased or leased by the companies that displayed them?
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, good question. So I've heard two different things in all my research. A lot of these giants, they were, you know, if you owned a restaurant and you wanted a Paul Bunyan, you know, at your restaurant, you would purchase it outright. Where it wasn't purchased outright was when it was working like, I mean, International Fiberglass always got paid, right? But like say Phillips 66 and the Cowboys, there was programs where the station didn't always purchase the giant, and maybe it just came in for 2 weeks, got stood up and went on its merry way. But at the same time, we have found evidence that the station owners did have the option to permanently buy these statues, and they often did. So there was both situations going on.
Okay. Patricia Young asks, have you ever been to Australia? They've got a ton of giants down there, apparently, down under.
I have been to Australia, and it must have been before I got into Muffler Men because, well, I was on a work trip both times, so I didn't have a lot of tons of free time. But I will say that other countries have really cool art and sculptures and figures. And those other countries, the people there are often very interested in what we have as well. I mean, it's pretty evident that travelers on Route 66 love the Muffler Men. I don't know how many times people have asked me, when can we get one in England, a Muffler Man in England? So yeah, I need to go to Australia again, apparently.
Yeah, apparently there's a bunch down there now. I'm just scrolling down to some of the newer questions that are coming in. Oh, so Alan Woodruff asks, how many Muffler Men were made and how many do you think are still out there? And just before you answer that question, you know, I'm sure you're well aware of diners, of course, and there are people, including SCA members, who track every single diner that was ever manufactured by the various companies and knows where they are or what became of them. Is there anything like that for Muffler Men?
Yeah, I've created somewhat of an exhaustive list. And of course, there's others. Roadside America has a lot of details on how many giants. And Deborah Seltzer, she has a great inventory on her website of all kinds of stuff. So she knows, you know, she knows a lot about how many of each thing. But specifically with the Muffler Men, I have made an exhaustive list of every kind that we know of and where they are and all this stuff. It's right around 200, and that includes like random heads and different body parts as well. Numbers if anyone's interested in all this. But they made more than that, obviously. I mean, we know they made 300 big friends and they're all gone, but I'm sure they made probably over 300 giants as well. And of course, some of those have been lost to time. But yeah, somewhere around 200, maybe a little less. I'd have to look at my numbers.
Okay. Jeremy asks, who else is still making the fiberglass giants? He knows of FAST or Fast in Sparta, Wisconsin. You know,
yeah, that's correct. Yeah, they make and when I'll just say real quick, when we talk about Muffler Men, you know, that term everyone has their own definition, right? A lot of people say Muffler Men is any kind of giant. When I say Muffler Men, I'm really referring to the specific Paul Bunyan style giant made by International Fiberglass. So you have companies like Fast, right, that have an awesome boneyard you can walk through and stuff, but they don't have any. They've made a giant that looks kind of like a Muffler Man, but I don't know if he's technically a Muffler Man.
Hope we're getting
Companies
real-
that have made other giants, but when we talk about Muffler Fiberglass, and of course the ones like Mark Klein is making, yeah, they're new, but they are Muffler Men as well.
Okay.
Did
Yeah,
I answer? I think I answered that question.
Yeah, I think so. Diane asks the question about the museum. The opening of the museum is dependent on raising the remaining funds, but do you have any possible timelines? She has heard summer 2023.
Yeah, that's correct. I just talked to Bill Thomas last week. He's very optimistic. As far as our giants, they are to be trickling in, which is kind of a cool thing for the visitors, right? Because, you know, there'll be some things there this coming summer, and then you come next summer and there's a bunch of new stuff and the following and following. So we're going to keep supplying more and more and more and stuff to the museum. But Bill Thomas is optimistic that it will open in May. There may not be a lot of figures yet, but the exhibits will be up. So you can look at the pictures, you can walk through the exhibits, and learn the history, and there will be some stuff there. And then, of course, every time you go back, there will be more. So he's hoping in May. I don't know if that's in stone yet. Yeah, that's what we're gearing to. It's not a huge building, but we're gonna pack this thing. So I think it'll be a really cool experience as you're driving through Atlanta, Illinois.
Here's a great question. Was there a real model for the Muffler Man?
A model, like, yeah. So one of the guys I'm really good friends with used to paint for International Fiberglass, and he was very young when he did it. So he's still living today. And he said when they and they stopped International Fiberglass as far as making the Muffler Men, the figures, they threw buckets of stuff into the dumpster. And he told me that there was kind of a run on the dumpster. All the workers at Interform ran over there and started pulling stuff out. He said in Violet Winslow's office was this whole line of small miniature Muffler Men prototypes that had been made, and they all got pitched. And he told me that they all got scooped up and he didn't get one. He did save a lot of the advertising material, which is what you guys were able to enjoy tonight, some of it. But apparently there was miniatures, and I have seen a Texaco advertisement when the Big Friend program was running that said, come down to the station, check out our Big Friend, and have a chance to win a drawing for a 3-foot replica of the Texaco Big Friend. I don't know what that looked like, but yeah, I've discovered stuff like that.
Wow. I'm just going to take a few more questions. We're losing your feed occasionally too, Joel, but we can still hear it all. Beth Murray asks, do you know where the mobile Muffler Man ended up?
Well, there was more than one, but we are pretty sure that the Muffler Man was in Salt Lake City. We're not positive, but the Muffler Man that was looked like Mr. Spock at Rainbow Signs in Salt Lake City, he has the right hat. And so we speculate that he might have been a mobile man, and he was recently purchased by a Muffler Men collector that runs a towing company in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and it was moved there. And I think we're going to restore him eventually when we get done with some of our stuff for the museum, and we're going to put him back as a mobile man, I believe, is the plan. So we think he's one. There's probably others. I mean, for example, if you take that mobile man hat off, right, it could be any Muffler Man. So we don't really know. You know, you take a cowboy hat off of a Muffler Man, and now it's just a standard, but it could have been a cowboy in a past life. Matter of fact, some of the Muffler Men we all know well today could have been a spaceman. I mean, you remove the helmet, and now it blends in with all the rest. So yeah, you never really know. That's why I love to dig into the history, but there's so much stuff we still haven't uncovered.
Just going to give two more questions, Joel, and then we'll wrap it up because we're starting to lose our people. And by the way, we hit 100 viewers tonight, which is a very good mark for these presentations. So congratulations. And you held them all through the whole presentation as well. So second last question, what is the price range of one of the new Muffler Men? And there was also a question earlier about what did they go for when they were originally built in the 60s?
Good question. Yeah, I should have written it down. If my memory serves me right, originally they were somewhere in the $2,000 to $3,000 range. This is late 60s, 1968 catalogs. I don't have one here in front of me, but I think that's about. I remember the Gemini Giant cost like $3,100, and don't quote me on that, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood. Of course, they've gone up. When I started this, you could still find them for like, a few $1,000s. And now they've continued to rise, depending on the quality, and the version and how rare it is. We've sold, ones that have needed a lot of restoration for, 16, 17,000. And then you can buy a new one like Mark Klein, his run around 20,000 for a brand new one. And then of course, if you have something really rare, like a Texaco Big Friend, I imagine it would be worth quite a bit more. But generally a fully restored Muffler Man will run quite a bit more than a remake, if it's fully restored and painted and ready to go, if it's original.
Well, thanks so much, Joel. This whole presentation has been amazing, and you obviously have an encyclopedic knowledge of this. I think you're gonna be getting a lot of visitors to the new museum when it opens, including myself when I'm down that way. Maybe the SCA should be holding a conference in that area, because it sounds like it's going to be fascinating. And I'd like to thank also all of our participants tonight that came in and watched the show and learned something and were entertained. So I just want to remind everybody before we go that about next month, when on April the 12th, so that's really only it is next month, April the 12th, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central and 5 Pacific, Susan Bregman will take us to the Candlepin bowling lanes for a look at the story of this regional version of a popular recreation. SCA and Candlepin Bowling Association members will be receiving the relevant details and registration link by email, and anybody else, of course, can always register through the SCA website directly. So thanks again for spending some time with us tonight. Expect an email shortly if you are not already an SCA member, inviting you to join the SCA and enjoy all the benefits of membership if you've enjoyed tonight's presentation. And if you want to watch it again, or if you have friends that would like to see the presentation, it will be posted on the SCA's website tomorrow, and anybody can watch it there. So thanks again, everyone, and especially to you, Joel, for a top-notch presentation. Any parting words that you'd like to have for us?
No, just a big thank you to all my followers and everybody's interest in Muffler Men. We really appreciate it.
Okay, and maybe we can remind people to make a donation to the museum project.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, well, with that, I will bid everyone a good night, and we will see you in a month's time.